And of course, you also have to deal with the tendency of farmers to want to be the lord of their estates. And so every time there's a good year in terms of high crop prices, they like to take out a big loan, buy a huge tractor that has a satellite dish on it, air conditioning, and a television set inside. The next year, crop prices go down and they lose the tractor, and they're out on their land drinking again. So, the state needs to take a role to organize agriculture in a way to make it productive again. My own country provides a nice example of that with the county agent system, which was remarkable in transforming the frontier of the United States into one of the most productive agricultural regions in the world, state-led. Not only was it done with county agents, but we created the land-grant universities, which provided the agricultural technology to do it. There are a number of other suggestions in, plug again, Latvia Renewed, that address some of these issues. Just a final comment, and outside of your question, I mean, the thing that we I think have not done is to create a successful model for recycling capital within Europe. I mean, ultimately, that's what it gets down to. We have a model which takes capital from the rich Western countries and dumps it into the poor eastern periphery or southern periphery, either in the form of aid, that has both up and down sides, but also through lots of debt. And that is bad, because ultimately the interest payments grow to the point where the economies that are burdened by this debt cannot repay that debt and still invest in their own economies and build a future. The Bretton Woods system represented a successful example of capital recycling within Europe. Keynes, again, essentially articulated the problem, I think, quite nicely, recognizing that unless you provide that successful recycling model in a way that developed these countries' economies that were torn up by World War II, you would essentially have World War III on your hands in 20 years. Can that model be taken as a recipe and applied writ large to the present situation? No, but we do need to rethink how we deal with this problem of recycling capital from the rich countries to the poor countries in ways which do not make them debt dependent and which underdevelop their economies. I completely agree with what you were saying about how the introduction of the euro in some respects stalled development in Greece, not to mention Spain and Portugal, through permitting them to just get money cheaply, to borrow, and get themselves in debt, while at the same time making their own goods prohibitively expensive, and thus landing them in the crisis. The only comment that I would add regarding Portugal is that it never entirely developed because it was the only country in Europe that followed the advice of David Ricardo and England in not using developmental state policies. They were the only one who rejected the policies of Friedrich List and the American political economy tradition that came out of the land grant institutions, which suggested a different path than with predictable results, I think, for Portugal.
Any comments from you?
No, I'm happy.
Yes, please.
You mentioned our overheating economy and 8% growth rate. And I'm wondering how much does the Central Bank assess our overage gap at the moment, as it was suggesting raising taxes and cutting back some social contributions. Maybe another question related to that. How should we assess whether we are cost prices already or not? Or unemployment rate is quite high still. I would argue that about 90% of the statistically unemployed get some 60 euros from the state.
You will take away these 60 euros, or you will take away these 60 euros, they're having too much luxury, or?
With the 50 euros, whether it's too much or too little. Because the GDP is growing at a rate of 8%, but in the fourth quarter, at least food consumption contracted 7%, on a yearly basis, and I'm pretty sure in the first quarter of this year it will contract another 5% after years of contraction already. So maybe this recovery is not so broad-based still, and what would be the possible fiscal actions?
Yeah, you know you bring me into problems here, so this was the reason why I asked the question. So, I don't know, were you watching Formula 1 race this weekend? And they crashed I don't know how many cars because they had some problems finding out will the turn continue or will it suddenly go straight again? And I guess many central banks also crash cars for the same reason. Regarding the first question, I simply don't know anything about what is forecast anything or what people are thinking, because the membership of the euro means that SD Bank has sort of become a place with lots of secrecy. So people are not. So before you could sort of ask, what do you think about this? And then they say, I'm going to Frankfurt tomorrow. So the sort of insights, even if I was so stupid that I would reveal it here, then I simply don't have them, unfortunately. It is a problem. Krugman has, yesterday I think, criticized Europe or European governments, whoever he criticized, for not just pressing the pedal to the metal. That the European countries should pursue wildly expansionary fiscal policies to get Europe safely out of the slump.
He did use the term wildly, by the way, but go ahead.
Okay, it's sort of probably interpreted a little bit here. I suspect I don't know if he also recommends that for, say, Greece or Ireland, but I think he must refer to some sort of major countries with AAA ratings. The problem is when you have these ambitions of using fiscal policies actively, and I'm in principle in favor of that, it's standard EU consensus. We should let the automatic stabilizers work. We should run deficits in bad times. We should accumulate surpluses in good time. The problem is that it's so difficult to know. And I mean, the forecasts of, for example, GDP growth are all over the place. The Ministry of Finance is one of the institutions which is struggling greatly to find out where we're heading. Because, of course, if we're heading towards zero at the end of the month of the year, probably we should press the pedal a little bit more, which will be tax cuts with the current government. On the other hand, if we are heading towards 8%, then we will probably pick up our output gap, our slack, in a couple of years. And then one might be concerned that one overdo it. And if I say that I would know exactly what to do, I mean, the uncertainty interval is so big that I cannot, I'm 2 meters and 4, but I cannot illustrate. It's still bigger than that. And this applies, unfortunately, also to measures of the fiscal balance. So we now know, so as you know, we have in the EMU, in the Europe, we have this monitoring of the fiscal balance. And we're looking at the cyclically adjusted fiscal balance. So we try to take out the effect coming from the side. And now, and that means that the Commission has to tell, Germany or Denmark, you're off track. But the numbers are revised so much afterwards that in half of the cases, these warnings were wrong. They were wrong both ways. They were wrong sometimes there were no problems in Denmark last year, or there were problems which were not overlooked. So it builds on these sort of forecasts, and either you can say that the economists are idiots and have no clue about what happens in the future. I think with my background, I would sort of argue that we have a tough job looking into the future, and I can follow your point that if the food consumption is down because prices are exploding, but what is the right, I mean, I can tell you, if we meet here again in a year, I can tell you what the right response would have been. But yeah, I'm sorry, it's not much answer here.
The rest of the panel have any comments?
During the Irish potato famine, the response of the British to the massive exodus of starving Irish immigrants to the United States, in addition to the 1 million people who died of famine, was they're eating too much still. There needs to be a further adjustment. Now, you're right. At what point do we assess that an adjustment is needed in policy and that austerity is enough? At what point do we assess that we are putting the pedal to the metal? Well, I don't know, maybe we could have some agreement on a few simple metrics. And then again, maybe not. I would suggest,
not, no.
Yeah, I would suggest that when you have double-digit unemployment, that it might begin to cause one to reflect on whether or not one is investing enough in one's economy. The argument that Mr. Krugman made in his article yesterday in the New York Times was that we are wasting enormous amounts of human capital. We have tens of millions of people who are not working and not adding any product to the global economy. That, I would argue, is a problem. Now, if we have 3 or 4% unemployment, well, perhaps we can make an argument whether or not we should be doing anything to further stimulate the economy. But when we have unemployment rates of this magnitude, I would argue, and Dr. Krugman would argue, we have a problem. And we need to begin to think about solutions. We may differ on what those solutions are, but I think we can agree we have a problem.